Hello, everybody. We are live for NBT at Home Founders Month edition. I am your host, moderator, ChelseaDee. I'm here with a cohort of alumni who are just blazing trails into the new world, into the future. And so I'm so excited to be talking to everybody here this evening. But before we get into this, I want to take a moment to talk about what we're doing here for Founders Month, and why the significance of what this year really means. Thinking about 50 years since the beginning of the National Black Theater, and what does the next 50 years look like? What is that going to entail? How are we going to get there? So part of how we're figuring that out is through these conversations. For myself, personally and spiritually and artistically, I've been figuring out, well, what does the future look like? How can we really plot out a map, incorporating all of our insight, but then also thinking from an infrastructure place. How do we do this? So NBT has launched the Vision Forward Fund. Okay? And this fund is going to help ground, fortify, and help NBT imagine yet another 50 years. So these principles of grounding, fortifying, and imagining, those are the reasons why we are starting this fund, so we can figure out how we can sustain ourselves for the next 50 years. We want to start an archive so that we can really preserve the legacy of Dr. Teer and the technology of soul, and just all of the things that have been created over the course of NBT's 50 years. We're figuring out how we can build capacity so that artists like who we're talking to today can have even more support, even more resources, even more access through this fund. And how are we imagining the future for NBT? So check out NBT's website, Facebook page. There's a little button that says donate, and that will go to the Vision Forward Fund. So that's a part of what we're talking about today. But more to the point, I would like to introduce the folks who are on this call. We were talking before we went live, and there was just so much just so much goodness, such a reminder of why we're doing this, who is this for? I'm circling back to that, Ngozi. That's an inside joke that I'm now making outside. But really, really so wonderful to be in communion with you all. And I'm gonna do some introductions. Starting off with Mfoniso Udofia, a first-generation Nigerian American storyteller and educator, attended Wellesley College, obtained her MFA from the American Conservatory Theater, and while at ACT, co-pioneered the NIA project, which provided artistic outlets for youth residing in Bayview/Hunts Point. Productions of her plays Sojourners, Run Boy Run, Her Portmanteau, and In Old Age have been seen at the American Conservatory Theater, the New York Theater Workshop, the Playwrights Realm, Magic Theater, National Black Theater, Strand Theater Company, and Boston Court. She's the recipient of the 2017 Helen Merrill Playwright Award, the 2017-18 McKnight National Residency, and commission at the Playwrights Center, and is a member of the New Dramatists. She's also worked as a television writer on 13 Reasons Why, Little America, and Pachinko. Mfoniso, welcome back.
Hey, that was a strong read of my bio. Hello.
Yes. And that's what's happening right now. It's so good to see you.
Thank you. I'm
very good to see you. Awesome. Okay, I'm gonna move on. And yes, everybody will be getting a strong reading rendition of their bio. So just buckle up, okay? Just buckle up. Okay, moving on to Ngozi Anyanwu. She was educated at the University of California, San Diego, MFA in acting, Point Park University, BA. Playwriting, she wrote Good Grief, The Homecoming Queen, The Book of Lucy and Nike, or We Don't Need Another Hero, Good Grief was on the Kilroy's list in 2016, a semifinalist for the Princess Grace and Humanitas Award. It was also produced at Center Theater Group in Los Angeles in spring 2017, which Anyanwu also starred in, as well as off-Broadway in the fall of 2018 at the Vineyard Theater. Anyanwu has also received residencies and is also commissioned with NYU, the Old Globe, and the Atlantic Theater. Ngozi, what's good? How are you?
Hey everybody, that was a strong read. I like the finger and started. I appreciate it. I'm good. Hanging out here in LA.
Great.
If I'm looking down, it's because I'm also dog sitting, not because I'm on my phone. So I'm also dog sitting. So if you see me, it's like me trying to calm down a dog. FYI.
Thank you. Thank you for the update. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, Lee Edward Colston II. Welcome, welcome. Here we go. Lee Edward is a queer Philly native, former prison guard, and MMA fighter turned actor, television writer, playwright, director, acting teacher, and author. In 2019, Lee's critically acclaimed play, The First Deep Breath, opened to rave reviews at Victory Gardens Theater in Chicago, as well as being a semifinalist for the Page 73 Playwriting Fellowship and a finalist for Barrington Stage Company's Berman New Play Award, as well as being the 2020 recipient of the Steinberg New Play Award citation. Television writing credits include season 4 of Fargo on FX and For Life on ABC. Lee Edward, what's happening?
What's good? Just happy to be here. That was a very strong read. Thank you very much.
Consistency, okay? That's what we're going for.
We love to see it.
All right, moving on. Angelica Chéri is a playwright, musical theater book writer, lyricist, screenwriter, and poet. The plays of her Prophet Cycle trilogy include The Seeds of Abraham, Billie Holiday Theater, mentored by Lynn Nottage, The Sting of White Roses, National Black Theater Festival, and Croundation, National Black Theater I Am Soul Residency. Angelica and her collaborator, Ross Baum, is that it? Baum? Okay, Ross Baum, received the Richard Rodgers Award for their musical Gun and Powder, which had its world premiere at Signature Theater, directed by Robert O'Hara. She was the master playwright in the Frank Silvera Writers Workshop inaugural 3 and 3 Playwright Festival, and has written for the Obie Award-winning 48 Hours in Harlem Festival and the Fire This Time Festival. Angelica, howdy do?
Amen. Ashe. Yes to all the commas and the capital letters in the bio. Thank you.
You gotta honor that. You gotta honor the text.
I am well. I'm in LA and I'm staying away from COVID and
Amen.
living my best life in this quarantine.
And staying hydrated. Y'all may not be able to see it, but off camera. Okay. All right. Okay, moving on. Dominique Ryder is a director and dramaturg based in Brooklyn, New York. They believe in living and loving like it is the end of the world. Agreed.
Amen.
Dominique's work seeks to answer the question, what is a world unmade by slavery? They worked as a director, assistant, and collaborator at Ensemble Studio Theater, the Haiti Cultural Exchange, MCC, the Old Globe, the Lark, Soho Rep, the Atlantic, the Bushwick Star, Club Thumb, Long Wharf, Flux Theater Ensemble, WP, the Movement Theater Company, and the Black Lady Theater. They are the director in residence for the National Black Theater through 2021. Dominique, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's Dominique.
Dominique, great, good. Dominique, welcome. How are you doing? You doing okay? You doing all right? Okay.
Jesus, I'm doing great. We out here in these fabulous streets. It's just me and some Haitians, you know, gang.
Gang, okay? I'm with it, Dominique, I'm with it. All right, so today, for today's show, we're talking about what fueled Dr. Teer to create NBT, which is just kind of a bigger, larger conversation we're having for the next 3 weeks, 4 weeks. Oh, okay. July 16th is the last conversation. So the rest of this month, we're going to be getting into this. And the question we're asking today is, what does it mean to create radically free spaces? Do we still need these spaces? And how do we sustain what we create? For today's check-in questions for the artists, and just to give everybody a heads up, we'll start with Angelica. But to give you a heads up for what those check-in questions are, we're doing an accessibility check-in. Are your needs being met? And accessibility is referencing physical, emotional, psychological. What do we need to do for you as a community to make you feel most present? So accessibility check-in, give us some project updates or something creative that you're working on that you want folks to know about. And then the last question is, which residency did you participate in at NBT? And how has working with NBT changed or affected your approach to art making? And we'll start off with Angelica.
Okay, here we go. So the first part of this is the accessibility check-in, right? So for myself, I am feeling very abundantly supplied, thankfully. And I feel as though in this moment, what's really been wonderful is the outreach that's been happening by the community. I feel like there's just been so many check-ins saying like, sis, are you good? Do you have what you need? Where do you want to fit into this conversation, right? Because we've been having lots of conversation about with everything that's been happening with George Floyd, with Breonna Taylor, with Ahmaud Arbery, and with the litany of other Black bodies slain unjustly, talking about what our position is and how we are moving forward and taking control of our space. And so I've been feeling really empowered by just seeing the mobilization of specific pockets happening, even within our own Black theater community, right? Like there's like a Venn diagram of different people galvanizing. And so that's been really, really fulfilling. So just to be a part of that, to see those circles kind of like converging together and to just be a part of all these conversations has been fueling me. And then I also do a healthy amount of going down into my rabbit hole and staying out of everything and to be able to create, because I feel like if I start my day with everyone else's thoughts, then I can't hear my own. And so I think that there's been a healthy balance, as healthy as it, you know, it's a work in progress, but like a healthy-ish balance of absorbing, staying up to date, and then going away, doing what I have to do, and creating in a safe, unfiltered space. So all that to say, I feel pretty checked in and feel pretty supplied in a good way. Yes. And so what's the next thing? What's the next question?
Any creative projects or updates that you have for folks?
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay. So most recently, Gun and Powder, the musical, which is about the legacy of my great aunties who passed for white and according to legend were notorious outlaws in Texas. And it's just been really interesting to think about having that story in the front right now. I mean, we started writing that piece in 2014 when Mike Brown was killed in Ferguson. And then now in 2020, it feels even more, you know, current, but you can't even call something like that. It's just always continuously becoming more and more present in our society. But that piece had a run that closed just before the shutdown. And we had a lab that was scheduled in New York for May. And so that's been since postponed to the beginning of next year, hopefully. So that's been happening and we've been working on that. I've also just been spending a lot of time working on TV, a couple pilots and a couple film scripts, because I just feel like this is the time to focus on mediums where we don't have to be in the same room to experience them. So that's been really fulfilling and a great way to kind of balance my creative palette. And then also doing some spoken word poetry over IG Live, which has been really fun, and being able to share with people across the country. So that's been really dope. And forgive me, love, the last question.
Last one is, which residency were you a part of, which year, and how has working with NBT affected your art making process?
Oh my goodness.
That's a big one.
That's a big one, goodness gracious. So I was part of the I Am Soul Playwright residency, and that ran from 2016 to 2018, and it culminated with the piece Crownation, which was directed by Caesar Williams, and starring Sharia Irving, and stage managed by beloved Belinda Harden. And so it was just, one of the things about that piece is because it's a one-woman show and it's my story, and it was the most naked storytelling I've ever done. It was just like straight up truth telling, like, this is it, this is my business, y'all. Like, y'all funny, just hear it. The impulse was to, because it was part of a trilogy, was to start writing that piece under the same guise of, okay, this is a family drama about these 6 people, and you can kind of weave the truth in somehow. But it was, the more I kept leaning into that, the more characters kept getting cut back, the more that it was just clear that it was just like, it's this woman's time to just stand up here and just talk about her business, and you to talk about your business and put yourself out there. And so that was terrifying. That was a lot of like crying and praying and drinking wine and listening to gospel music, writing all of it together at the same time, writing that piece. But what was so helpful was just the love and the support that NBT created, the safe space, the conversations, the incense, everything. Like, just being able to say, girl, okay, burn this nag champa, go get you a chicken plate and come in here and let's talk about it. And it was just like, this is how I want to be working. Thank you. I need this. I need to be able to feel like I have permission to just come up here and tell the truth. And so that was reinforced by everyone, by Jonathan, by Sade, by Alan C. Edwards, our lighting designer, by Sharia, like just every single person who was present. And so I thank NBT for that. And that has stayed with me. No more filters.
Wonderful, wonderful. Just an affirming, honest, raw experience. Beautiful. Dominique, can we check in with you now?
Yes, of course you can. Hey.
Okay, so let us know about your accessibility and any updates or creative projects you want us to be mindful of.
I think in terms of accessibility, I'm good. I got these glasses on. You know, I hate wearing glasses, but I got to see somehow. So we're here. needs are always met as long as that insurance comes through. And as for creative projects, I'm not really working on anything right now. Super intentionally, I think once the shutdown hit for me, it was like, I don't need to be thinking creatively right now, right? Like, because I wanted some time to refuse creativity, because I think that so often for myself, like as a director, that my creativity went into the service of like capital, you know what I mean? And so for me, the shutdown has really been about, okay, well, one, what is a director? What does that mean? And then 2, who is Dominique as a person, the artist aside, the person who needs to work aside, right? Like, who is Dominique without their connection to labor? And that has been super, super useful for me in just thinking about how I need to move forward into like the next space, right? And then the next question, I think I answered the question about creativity and updates at the same time. I am not yet an alumni. It actually feels so funny. It feels like everyone else is like a graduate student who's like moved on, just doing their things. And I'm just like, I'm still at the school. So I am the directing resident through 2021. And I think the biggest thing for me that NBT has done has really, NBT's existence has let me know that like white institutions don't have to be anything to me, right? That like, I have been in a place where I'm able to focus on directing. I remember like I directed this reading and Jonathan wanted to have a note session afterwards, and he was like, if you want to be a better director, you need to be able to convey emotions without having your actors talk to each other. And I was like, I had 4 hours. How could I do that in 4 hours? He was like, I don't know, but if you were a better director, you'd be able to do it, right? And it's that sort of like intense rigor when thinking about what being a director is that's been really important. And just the chance to think about outside of playwrights, outside of designers, like who is Dominique as a director and what is the craft of directing? Because that's not the thing you get a lot of places. Most directors never have it. And so to be able to get that sort of like hands-on experience like that has been very, very important to me. And then also just being able to bring in other niggas to NBT and just be like, this is also your space, right? That's also been very fulfilling.
Oh man, it's just such a goodness. And I say, oh man, is a general phrase of just, I so understand this idea of it's so resonating with me, this idea of disconnecting your creativity from commercial output, and for figuring out who you are, the part of you that needs to work. outside of figuring out who you are. And I think that's such a precious lesson to be really engaging in right now. So thank you for talking about that, because that's real. Lee Edward, let's check in. How are you doing? Give us your accessibility and any updates.
I am blessed and highly melanated. Yeah, as far as accessibility, I mean, I would love to access some sleep because my sleep cycle is all fucked up right now. And I think a lot of it is like, just from stress, of, trying to survive a plague and a revolution at the same time, which is, its own experience that is specific to us as Black folks. But other than that, my heart is good and I'm happy, and I'm building accessibility points for myself to really help myself to thrive. As far as like projects that I'm working on, I'm writing a new play right now, and I'm also developing a lot in television and in film. So those things have been keeping the lights on, which is great. It's a great time to write in television right now. And it's a doubly great time to be Black and writing in television right now. Things could be better for all of us, for sure. But yeah, I'm trying to imagine the future right now. I'm trying to imagine, like, what the world is going to need artistically to help us to heal and to help us to move forward and to help us to organize our thoughts and our experience, and to help us have a catharsis after this experience is done, because we're going to need that in order to be able to move forward. So I'm trying to imagine what that looks like in a post-COVID world, post-2020 revolution world, and I was a playwriting resident at NBT. I think I started in 2017 and finished in top of 2019. And yeah, that's where I'm at.
Did it impact your way of working?
Absolutely. I mean, NBT has just this place in my heart that no other institution will ever have in my heart. And it's one of the reasons why I will sing NBT's praises from the mountaintop, now and forevermore, amen. Because it was the safest environment for me as a Black creative that I've ever been in. And it was a place that, even though when I got my residency, it was also around the time when I'd first been introduced to NBT. So it was kind of like a very new experience for me. And I walked in and I was like, oh, I'm home. I just felt it. I felt, I was like, I feel completely protected and safe in here, which then helped my vulnerability to expand more, which then helped me to be even more creative. It's one of the things that's most difficult for Black artists navigating white institutions, is that we're trying to do that dance of how do I make sure that I'm, keeping myself protected while also trying to be the most vulnerable version of myself as well, to produce art and then to produce the things that I care about. And so that becomes a tug of war, push-pull dance sometimes. And during my soul residency, that was the first time I did not have to do that. And I was like, oh, this is what this feels like, to not have to have that, part of your brain working in the background, because it does take up space, the navigating of that. And some of that is necessary for our survival as human beings and our creative survival as artists. And some of it is just, necessary for us as Black people. And it's interesting, you don't know how heavy something is until you put it down and you stop carrying it. And then you're able to actually breathe. So yeah, I mean, my soul residency was a life-changing experience for me.
Wow. You never know. You never know how heavy it is until you are given space to release it. And that was such a big part of Dr. Teer's philosophies, healing at the center of the art making. So it's glad to see that it's still active. Okay, Ngozi, let's have a check-in. Let's have a check-in.
I like that. Let's see, accessibility wise, I'm in Cali, I'm in LA, I have running water. I'm currently looking for a therapist. So that's where I'm at the moment. I'm currently seeking a therapist. So please, they're making all the money right now. If you think Black TV writers are making the money, it's the therapists making money, because I can't find a Black woman who's not overextended. God bless them. So if you know anybody, that's where I'm currently at. So right now, I think I'm in the place of looking for inspiration, working on some stuff for me. I'm commissioned, so I'm like in and out working on those things. I'm in the place where representation is like, do you got anything? And like, let's capitalize on this moment. And like, it's kind of the last thing I'm interested in. And that kind of changes moment from moment, hour to hour, as far as, do I want to make something right now? Do I want to pitch something right now? And then it's like, it's 2 o'clock. I actually just want to go to bed. / 2 hours ago, I was just eating oxtail in front of all of you. So that's kind of like how it's been moment to moment. It's literally like, I don't know what I want to do. And then the next day I'll write a play. You know what I mean? Like, and you know, so right now I'm just mostly thinking about how I can be of service, and just trying to extend my time to friends and go on walks and have some great phone calls and maybe read some people's work who like usually don't have access to me because I'm usually so busy working. So right now it has challenged me to be in a place of service for other people, and how can I give a little bit and like take mat naps. And so most of my time right now is spent on my sister, who's starting a new management company. I promise I'll give a shout out because now I'm her manager. So I'm talking about Anyanwu, who's starting CheTalentManagement.com. Look her up. Hit her up, send some donations. Black woman business, you know what it is. What else? Which then veers into that I was the first producing fellow that they had here at NBT. Jonathan brought me in after I had, with my sister and some other friends, self-produced Good Grief at Intar, and had also, you know, had co-produced First Generation Nigerian Project with Mfoniso and Yvonne Orji and Jennifer Akabu and others. And so Jonathan had kind of, that was sort of the first institution that I was really brought into to sort of see the inner workings of like how it all works. You know, I'm kind of used to doing it in the very sort of scrappy way of like, all right, I want to make this thing. What does it take to make this thing? Let's put it together. Let's cross our fingers, invite people and see how it goes. And so he kind of brought me into a sort of institution to see. And what I learned from NBT was just the sort of like how to keep it holistic. You know what I mean? It for me, it reaffirmed the work that I already do, which is like just about making things and bringing your community in, you know? And so by the time that I was, you know, let into white institutions or predominantly white institutions, I kind of already walked in with the mentality of like, great, but like, I need you to let me, like, I need my, like, this is my director, this is why, this is what I need you guys to do for the community so that they feel welcome to come in. And this is what I need for you to do for the artist. So for me, it was just a place that kind of fortified and gave me time to kind of feel powerful enough to walk into those institutions and demand what I want, because this is how you make good theater. And to challenge that too, because there's also still some challenging times also at NBT. So for me, it was sitting in on a lot of interesting conversations about what it means to make the play for the artist. What does it mean for the art, you know, for the actors along with that journey? Even what is that, you know, I also learned about the sort of the ins and outs of like, oh, this theater is having a harder time getting a review or getting publicity than like white theaters. Do you know what I mean? And like learning about all those, the intricacies of what a black, what a black institution has to go through just to get like the bare minimum of demand. Do you know what I mean? So for me, it was like, okay, great. Like this is something to know when I'm walking into those other institutions, you know? So yeah, I learned a lot about like the ins and outs of like the game, if you will. So yeah.
So much to be learned at that table. Within that office, there's just so much learning that happens by the printing machine, between the bathroom and the meditation room. There's just learning. So yeah, absorbing it all. And to round off our check-in, Mfoniso, what's happening? Let's accessibility. What do you need? What are you working on? How are you? Which residency were you a part of, and how's it affected you?
Oh, many questions. I'm gonna try and answer them all. As for accessibility, I am in New York City. I have been away from New York now, I'm gonna say almost half a year. So it's good to be in like my apartment with my pink wall that I thought long and hard about. So I'm feeling pretty good. I might have to like dip for a second and turn off my AC and get a charger. You know, like the first world struggle ship problems might actually happen. So in terms of accessibility, if you see me go, that's why. Yeah, but most of all, I'm feeling pretty good and easy and in my skin, and I'm very happy, which has been like a struggle to be that way. And it's interesting that it's happening in this time that I am figuring out what my center is when the whole world seems to be blowing apart. And so, yeah, I spend most of my time like in salt baths lately, like once every other day. I'm sitting in an Epsom salt bath. I'm pretty rigorously meditating, and I go on 5-mile walks. I have myself my weekly therapy meeting. I am doing some of the things that I need to do to be pretty whole, because 2020 has been a psychological devastation. So yeah, that's the truth. So about projects and updates, I am standing in the center of a lot of bounty, and I'm deciding not to do anything. So I have got a lot of commissions. I'm not writing on them until sometime later in July, because right now I'm taking a vacation. Before I took this vacation, I was working on a studio movie and working on TV and like trying to figure out a play. And I usually am always flirting with some level of exhaustion, but this time it became dangerous. And so I do nothing until I feel like doing something. And in the beginning, I wasn't okay with that, but I'm pretty good like being bored and watching. Like for some reason yesterday, I decided to watch Alf. It's a bad show, but it's a terrible show. But I was watching Alf, and next week, y'all, I will be watching Benson. I'm just making my way through all of the TV that I grew up on and like looking at it horrified. So that's what I'm doing. At some point, I will come back to Amen and 227 and heal myself. But right now, I'm on Alf. So those are my project updates. So as for the residency that I did, I was actually the first I Am Soul playwright. I think that was 2013. You might need to correct me on it because sometimes dates in my mind are kind of fuzzy. And I remember like talking with Jonathan and going, well, what do you want? And I hadn't really ever had a conversation about what do I want before. So I was like, I want some money. And he was like, okay, great. So does this mean we have to pay you to do this? I'm like, yeah, if you could pay for like a month for me or 2, I could write a play and not have to worry because I'm working gig jobs anyway. And Jonathan was like, bet, great, done. I'm like, great, let me ask for more things. So, and listen, I think that theater making is tricky. And I'm gonna be very honest here that whichever institution you go, it's tricky. And I also know who I am as a person. And I am like delightfully rigorous and pleasantly difficult at different points in my life, my career, my creation. So there were moments where it's like, no, it has to be this way. But this is what NBT can do. And I'm like, we need to have continual conversation about what my needs are as an artist and what the resources are here, because I know you bringing me in here means you actually want to have that conversation. So I'm very thankful to NBT that I got to actually be my true, complicated, creatively pleasant and difficult self, and got to manifest the show that I wanted to see, which meant like, y'all, no, we need to actually have, because I did Her Portmanteau, which is one of my cycle plays. That was the first time Her Portmanteau ever came to be, was at and with National Black Theater. And it was with National Black Theater that I was like, okay, these are the limitations of the space. This is what I need as an artist. We need to figure out a way for me to write this play a quarter in a BBO so that I can put my complication and who I am into the play. So it was there that I actually got to see exactly who I am as an artist and just start to get comfortable with that, and be easy in the totality of myself, as opposed to containing that because I am afraid. And I got to make some complicated, gorgeous work, and that play has gone on. So yeah.
Whew. Yes, thank you. I mean, I just feel like you just gave me permission to do a lot of things. So that was wonderful. Thank you. I mean, yeah, why, you know, and as you were saying earlier, like, who's this for? When I feel propelled to compelled to do work, to say yes, to get the draft out, to whatever. What is that? What's that coming from? And who am I in relationship to that? And Dominique, you spoke to that as well. Of like, what am I in relationship to my art and to my work? So I'm excited to really dig into that. Oh, Khalid Dokali, let me peek at my script. All right, so you know, it's a production. It's a production. So let's think about the purpose of theater. The purpose of theater, and I'm going to read a quote from an article that Dr. Teer wrote for the New York Times, and it's from the article called "Theater." And she's talking about why she felt the need to found the National Black Theater. And I want to use that as a jumping point into our conversation. So Dr. Teer says, she talks about how we, as in Black people, have allowed ourselves to be used by predominantly white institutions. Unless that is confronted, the Black artist will not see the need for a Black cultural art form, a way of working Blackly. She says the need for a Black cultural art form is more pressing than solving white racism. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about this Black cultural art form. And there's so many identities that we're bringing into this conversation. There's so much complexity of Blackness that Dr. Teer was beginning to understand. And so I just want to pose this question to the group. How do you see the need for a Black cultural art form, and how would you define that? What is a Black cultural art form to you? How have you seen it? How have you participated in the making of it? Where do you see it? Where do you not see it? Just trying to name this thing, Black cultural art form. And if there's anyone in particular who feels moved to just jump on out there.
I'll start. I don't think that there's a singular Black cultural art form, because I think there's many ways to express Black culture as there are Black people. I think there's a need for us to have room to express and interpret our Blackness through whatever unique lens and intersection that we sit in. I feel that's important. And it's something that we should carve out in space. We should have institutions that make room for that so that we can examine the complexity and nuances of ourselves and mine ourselves to be able to create work that's important to us.
Thank you. And I just want to also toss this out here. What are some things that allow folks to feel like they can bring all of their complexities? Like, and we can get very nitty gritty about this. Is it rehearsal space? Is it housing? What are the things that make you feel like you can bring your most authentic self to a space? And what is working Blackly? What is that for you specifically?
I mean, I think it's about having the confidence. And I don't know where, it's interesting. I'm trying to think of like where that stems from, the confidence kind of, because I think like that's whatever space, you can do that whatever space you walk into, you know? And as someone who doesn't get to or has not worked predominantly in Black institutions or Black spaces, as someone who's raised around white people, white spaces, white institutions, but has always felt confident walking in spaces and bringing Black people along and knowing that, oh, there's something missing here. I think there needs to be awareness. For me, it's like, oh, there's something missing here, and I'm actually not comfortable being the only one. Like, I've never been comfortable being the token. I've never been comfortable being, you know, so I've always had the want and need to bring Black people or African people or diasporic people with me, because it's just not where I feel at home. So for me, it's always been like, well, I don't quite feel at home. How do I make myself feel at home? So it's always been slightly, for me, self-serving, because I'm like, I don't feel comfortable being the only one in this space, even though I am celebrated in this space. So that's kind of always what it's been for me. It's like, I don't feel at home if I'm by myself, if I'm the only Black person there. I feel at home if there are other people with me and that they have the same politics of also wanting to bring other people with them. So that's at least, that's kind of what it means for me. It means something communal. And I don't know why that is. It might be because I come from a big family and what have you. I don't love the solitary space. I'm a writer, but I hate the act of writing. I want to get it done so I can get to the people. And so I can get to the human beings, and then so I can share it with the human beings. But for me, it's always been, at least for me, it means creating space where I can bring more Black people with me.
And I love that when you're talking about Black people, you're saying I'm specifically investing in and proud of and wanting to share my African heritage, like specifically my African heritage. But then there's also this American experience that you've had. And so can you talk a little bit about like the challenges or the tensions within like bringing lots of different Black people together? Like, what are the challenges within the diaspora that you maybe have experienced? And anyone else can speak to this too, if there's thoughts.
What's interesting in that is that there is also not a universal African experience, right? Like, I am Nigerian and I'm Igbo. Mfoniso is Ibibio. We work together. We are not the same person. You know what I mean? We have had our own complications and love within us, working as me being an actor in her pieces and her being an actor in my pieces, right? So like, for me, it's having the knowledge that even within my very specific culture, it is not monolithic. Nigeria is the most populated country in Africa, the 5th most populated country in the world. And so you're going to breed different kinds of people. And so I think I got a very early understanding that, and being bicultural or tricultural, right, is that I had a very early understanding that I need to take people as they are. Right, and that Black people have just as much of a diverse experience, you know. And so there are many things assumed about me because of how I walked into the space, and I never wanted to assume the same thing out of someone else, right? And so for me, it's mostly it's literally like, how do I holistically get to the person who is walking into this room and get that Black person, that African person, that no matter what part of the diaspora that they're from, really feeling fortified as an individual so that they can walk out and feel really powerful. I know what it is to walk into a space, be it Black or be it white or be it whatever, and feel like I don't belong. Like, I know what that is. And so for me, it's like, how do I get someone to walk into my space, let you see who I am, but also let you know that you belong here too. So that's just something that I am that is a mission that I'm trying to always remember pre the fancy stuff. You know what I mean? And if I can just always remember that, then it really doesn't matter who walks into the space. Then they know that too. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I love this. I love that we're talking about the holisticness that is required. And I think that's some of the brilliance that Dr. Teer brought with creating the National Black Theater is like, we as Black people have to think about our healing first and foremost and center that before we can, this idea of pouring from an empty cup, right? Before we can do anything for anyone else. So yeah, let's keep this conversation going. Is there anyone wants to talk about any challenges you've experienced going from a Black culturally specific organization into kind of a wider, maybe predominantly white organizations or productions? Any challenges, any advice to folks who are feeling the tension between the two?
I think I'm gonna tie in a little bit to what Ngozi was saying and then like flip into what you're asking. I hope, because I really resonate with what Ngozi's saying when she's talking in and around communion and like a certain kind of like, there's no way tokenism feels like an integrated home.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I have been like, for some of my close friends, they know I've been reading a lot of bell hooks, and I'm fascinated right now about what she talks, like when her definition of integration is the anti-compartmentalization, and that just blew my world. So there's something about what Ngozi is talking about that gets right to that point. And I also find, because of the kind of way I like to create and what creating Blackly is for me, a truly safe space not only has healing and communion, but also has the back end, which I sometimes find really missing, which is a certain kind of accountability. And the way in which I'm just gonna say it, like, predominantly white institutions, it takes a longer time to actually be able to figure out what accountability is amidst a lot of gas. It finds, I don't know, it's like everyone is so happy to have me there that I can't even figure out what the art of what I'm trying to do is anymore. And so it can feel a little like a haze if I'm not careful. So in order for me to continuously create Blackly, I have like a core group of friends who at every step of the way are reading my work. And I have like cis-kin friends who will pull me aside and will be like, okay, so can we talk about this line right here? Because it actually might be this. It actually might be this, so that I can hold myself accountable. So, because I am not only looking for healing and communion, I'm also looking to really stretch myself and my artistry and all of that. Sometimes I need a delightful check within my work, and I have been in enough institutions, and I'm at a place now where if I'm not careful, people might not always feel comfortable checking me. So part of what creating Blackly is for me is having healing space, safe space, and making sure the space is safe enough that somebody can go, I didn't get it.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of that lends itself to like what trust actually looks like. And there's like we toss this loaded word trust around a lot, but we don't actually all use the same definition of what trust looks like. And so like for myself, like I'm a huge reader of Dr. Brene Brown's work on like vulnerability and shame and healing and trust. And so I watched this like talk one time that she gave, and she broke down this based on her research, what the anatomy of trust was. And she broke it down into an acronym called BRAVING. And BRAVING breaks down into boundaries, reliability, accountability, vault or confidentiality, integrity, non-judgment, and generosity. And so whenever I'm in any space or any relationship, be it personal or professional, I'm always using that as part of my compass to be able to determine if am I being held in this space? Am I being safe in this space? Do I have, does the space love me enough to listen to me when I tell them the truth, even if that truth is inconvenient? And a lot of times, like, walking into predominantly white spaces, white people have no clue actually what most Black people need and what we think and how we feel about shit. And most white people don't have relationships with Black people. They work with Black people. They share spaces with Black people, but they don't actually know Black folks, because the majority of Black folks that they share space with enter those spaces wearing the mask. So they only know what our masks look like, but they don't actually know us. And so there's a twofold experience to that, right? You have white thought leaders trying to play damage control and virtue signal and, blame shift and deal with their own internalized shame, and then try to, like, I have to hurry up and learn what the new buzzword of the week is to prove that I am not quote unquote racist, as opposed to actually creating an environment that fosters trust and engenders Black folks to come at our fullness, and then not to punish or strip opportunities away from Black folks when we come in at our fullness, because we historically are the conscience of America, and we're the conscience of white America as well. It's a big reason why we receive a lot of the venom and vitriol that we do, because America historically does not want to listen to its conscience. And so to both Ngozi and Mfoniso's point, like, I think there's not a conversation about what trust actually looks like. And so people are like operating from their assumptions or operating from stereotype, in worst case scenarios, and then trying to piece things together that aren't actually in service of Black folks and fostering us to be able to live at our full size, but is really more so like, how do I protect myself so that I can appear to not be whatever thing that, I don't want, larger society to view me as. And so, and that doesn't actually serve us. That more so serves the egos and the sensitivities of predominantly white institutions. So, like, being able to create institutions for ourselves, because we know our needs. We know exactly what, our magic and our mess is, and we know what we look like at our full size, and we welcome that. It only makes institutions like NBT that much more valuable, so that we're able to create work that fully encapsulates the fullness of Blackness.
I think it's so interesting and so important what you're saying about trust, Lee, because one of the things that has remained an anchor for me in terms of the way that I'm creating in the rehearsal room and my relationship to these predominantly white institutions, and how I'm feeling like there's a safe way and a safe space to work Blackly in each of my situations and each of my productions, was obviously control of the narrative that's happening, which starts with me as the keeper of the words, but then also my director. And one of the things that has been so integral for me is my relationship with each director that I work with. I cannot work with a director who I do not trust. And I cannot work with a director who I don't feel comfortable being vulnerable with. And I cannot work with a director who I don't feel like the actors are going to be able to feel comfortable being vulnerable with. To that end, I've never worked with a white director. Not saying that I will not, and not saying that I am against it, but in the place that, in the stories that I have told thus far, and for the purposes of furthering the Black narrative in the way that I needed to tell it so far, the safest and the most anchoring voice for me was to have another Black person leading the ship in the space of the director, because in that rehearsal room is where all of that is being incubated for the message of what I'm trying to convey. And there have been so many conversations about what's happening with my body in this moment, what's happened to me historically in this moment that I'm saying it this way, where have I come from? There was a moment in the rehearsal period for Gun and Powder when Robert O'Hara was speaking about the history that we were presenting, because Gun and Powder is told in the Reconstruction era. He said very plainly, our work is this. In terms of the history that we're telling right now, what white people know, for Black people, slavery, civil rights. In between, we don't know nothing. They don't know nothing about what happened to us. And the truth of that could not have been said by a white person directing the play, nor would I have felt comfortable. I mean, you know what I'm saying? So it's about, for me, the safety of who's in the room with me, who's anchoring me, who's guiding the ship with me, and how do I know that this is going to get to the bodies who are ultimately responsible for conveying the story when I go back home for the next however many weeks that it's running. It's about who has set the table.
Yeah, I think that sort of like my interests are twofold, right? One, I think personally, all like art stuff aside, like Dominique might not believe in safety anymore. I think that like safety might be worth investigating as an idea of anti-Blackness and like a fulcrum of anti-Blackness, right? Like, what does it mean to be safe as a Black person when your life can be taken away at any given point, right? Like, there are so many ways Black people can be murdered, right? Some of them boring, some of them like extravagant, right? So for me, like, I think I am trying to find in my own practices another alternative to safety, something else that is not teaching me how to care for people in the ways that I've been disciplined and forced to think about care, right? Like, because the problem with care sometimes is like care is also anti-Black, right? The care can be a product of anti-Blackness, that the way we hold people cannot be the way that they sometimes need to be held or want to be held to grow as people, right? That's a fulcrum of anti-Blackness, just like I'm saying safety. But I think to your original question, Chelsea, for me, the idea of, how did Dr. Teer phrase it? Because it's a long phrase. Black.
A Black cultural art form, a way
Black
of working Blackly.
Right. I think a lot about one of my favorite theorists, Jared Sexton, right? Sexton argues that any thought, insofar as it is deeply investigated and genuine, is Black thought, right? I think similar things about Black art, right? And like a Black cultural art form, that any art that is thought through and made in the service of Black liberation, of Black emancipation, of Black freedom, is a Black cultural art form, right? Be that writing a play, be that a television show, right? But like the ways in which, God, I read too much. The ways in which that like we are thinking about, right, like liberation and emancipation and what that means for us personally, and then also collectively and globally, right, is a Black cultural art form that we have been engaging in, much like Marxism, since like slavery.
Thank you. That's just such an expansive collection of ideas, which I'm like writing down, because listen, this is how we're gonna get to the promised land. Okay. So now, last week I spoke with Ebony Noel Golden and some of the OG liberators who were the founding company members at the National Black Theater, who worked very closely with Dr. Teer and in developing the technology of soul. So, they come from a generation where working Blackly, they've got, it's literally down to a science. So they've got their entry point into that. But something that I think is really fascinating that I realized learning about Dr. Teer is this artist entrepreneurship relationship, where you as artists framing yourself as also an entrepreneur, someone who is creating opportunity, someone who is building infrastructure where there wasn't before. And in some of y'all's bios, I can see these seeds of, like with Good Grief and Ngozi, where you start with, you have the concept, you're in control of the narrative, you're bringing together a team of collaborators, you're opening the doors for people to come in and feel welcome, and you're learning the skills to be able to do that consistently. So I wanted to get everyone's thoughts on, what is the importance, is there an importance of being an artist and an entrepreneur? Do you see yourself as invested in those two things? Dr. Teer, the theater burned down in the 80s and she decided to just buy the whole block so that there could be this bedrock of financial autonomy for people to have this free creative space. So what are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on arts and entrepreneurship?
I think, sorry,
sorry,
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I think as time is going by and as we are now in the time that we are in, that feels like we've always been this time, but we're locked inside. The more and more the clock is ticking, it feels like, though this is something that a lot of us have always been, multi-hyphenates, creators, maker of things, it feels the need to, I don't know how to describe it. I don't know if it's like a land thing or a building thing or I am feeling the need or the urgency to feel like, where do I create a home for myself? I've always, in multiple ways, felt welcomed in certain spaces. And so Good Grief could not have happened without Lou Moreno letting me into his home that is mostly for Latinx artists. And me being a non-Latinx person, right? So, and you know, First Generation Project didn't happen unless John Gould Rubin was like, hey, here, come, I will welcome you into my labyrinth home and what have you. And so, you know, a lot of our plays can't happen until we're welcomed to somebody else's home, per se. And so the more I'm thinking as far as the entrepreneurial spirit, it's like, where do I get the capital, the courage, the chutzpah, the whatever, to just say fuck it and create a home for other people? At least for me. I don't know that everybody has to be that or everybody is that, but I will say that the more and more that I am making things, the more and more I'm less interested in having someone let me in their house or even going to someone else's house, you know? The more I'm coming into that entrepreneurial spirit and be like, damn, property is not as cheap as it was back when Barbara Ann Teer was doing some shit, but it is making me think about what does my NBT look like? You know, like I'm having those very big thoughts and you know, with these we see you letters and these demands and these things, I go, oh, I'm not so interested in someone who sees me or someone seeing me. I see me, I see you, I see all y'all. How can I be of service to create my own space? And maybe it looks like a building, maybe it looks like outside. I don't know what it looks like. Maybe it's in this space, but I think when I think of Barbara Ann Teer, the idea of this woman having this foresight that other institutions in New York did not have. And I'm thinking of what that looks like now, which is all just a big question mark, but that's where my head is at.
Yeah, oh, thanks for speaking to that. I really have been wondering, you know, what's wrong with me that I'm not so interested in being seen and being welcomed and fighting to get into these spaces? Like, what is it really going to look like for me to be creating homes for other people? And I feel like personally, this NBT at Home, these broadcasts is like me trying to inch into how I could do that and start to play with new mediums and tech to do that. So thank you for speaking to that. Lee, did you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, like I think that like I wholeheartedly agree with my sister. Like I'm always asking the question, it's like, well, be seen by whom? And you know what I mean? Like that, I feel like that's the important part of the equation. A big, for me, I feel like a huge responsibility lies on me to make sure that I'm decentering whiteness. In my work, in my life, you know, decolonizing how I think, you know, and really interrogating which parts of my experience and my worldview belong to me as a Black American man who is the descendant of Africans, and which parts are, you know, the parts that I've been socialized to think. And so whom am I prioritizing is really the question that I have to ask myself. And why am I doing that? And if I'm not prioritizing myself, if I'm not prioritizing the people who look like me, if I'm not prioritizing the most marginalized, then there's a lot of self-loathing that I accumulate. There's a lot of resentment, that I accumulate, and that really, falls into like codependency at its core, right? And so like if I am frustrated because I'm trying to get to your dinner table, and then I get to your dinner table and you don't even know how to cook the food like I like it, and I done all this work to try to get to your table, as opposed to I got food in the fridge. I mean, I don't, because my food is being delivered, but like, whatever. But like, but the point is, like, I can make things for myself. And there's a tremendous amount of power that I have found, like, in my own transformation over the last several years, in primarily working as an artist, and then really bleeding into, operating as a multi-hyphenate and as an entrepreneur, an artistic entrepreneur, and being able to create work opportunities for myself. There's a liberating thing that comes with that. And I was actually talking with Ngozi the other day about this, about like, there's just a freedom of generosity that we're able to offer when our survival is not tied to the work process. And we're able to, there's just a larger capacity of our hearts that we're able to bring into a space when we're not trying to worry about how to survive. And that's definitely, like, there's definitely privilege that comes from that. But I've also had to find, like, okay, so if I'm going to stay in this career, and it's a gig culture kind of career, I have to figure out a means for myself to be able to support myself when work stops, like, or when things fall flat. For me, like, I'm a teaching artist, and that is something that I'm deeply passionate about, is training and empowering other artists with a priority on Black and brown artists. And so that is, for me, that is a way that, like, when things were rough, I was able to sustain myself while I was in between gigs. And even now, when work is abundant for me right now, it's still something that I hunger for and that I prioritize, because it keeps my fingers on the pulse of why I started. And it's very easy to forget when things are going well, like, why it is that you're doing what you're doing, and most importantly, whom you're doing it for. And so, like, how do we make sure that we zero in on prioritizing our own needs and decentering the needs of white folks, and its presence in our work, to make sure that we're really specific about who we're talking to and why.
Can I jump in for a second? Because I admit right now, I'm struggling a little bit with entrepreneurship. So I just want to, like, say that out, that I'm actually having a lot of a struggle, and I'm gonna, like, sit in the center of my own hypocrisy for a second and go, I am somebody who likes things. I'm going to buy a leather catsuit and not wear it anywhere, and it's going to sit in my closet with a tag on it. I'm going to buy the whole Drunk Elephant skincare line and wonder why I broke out in acne. So, like, I have really confounding hypocritical leanings when we talk about what entrepreneurship, which to me is also tied to capital.
Amen.
So, and the roots of capitalism and the centering of whiteness are inextricably linked. So, and we haven't, I mean, I've been sitting on it for a little bit, because I also know that this is like a healing, like this is a loving space. But if we have conversations about entrepreneurship without having conversations behind propulsion and reason why we're doing what we're doing, and it being extraordinarily, like, rigorous, nuanced, and sometimes narrow, I think, we will then become Black people who are not creating Blackly, and Blackly is a big term anyway.
Mfoniso, what do you mean by propulsion? Sorry to interrupt you.
So I get it. There's a thing of like acquire, so that I can know that I am worth something, and know that we have made it. I have made it. And we're not interrogating why I want to acquire that, which might lead to a certain kind of, and this is me fighting in my everyday life within my own work, like a commercial Blackness, a watering down of art, something that is created by Black people that is not for Black people anymore, but we've got a lot of space. We've got a lot of buildings. We have a lot of things, just like my cat suit that's in the closet literally right now and not being worn and is kind of. So I guess I wish we could add more into that. Like when I create for me, and you read my bio, and there is an entrepreneurship there. That's what I mean when I say I have to stand in the center too of what I am and tell you the way in which I have figured this out for myself, I think. And I actually still might be wrong. But like for me, education is at the heart of everything that I do. And it is why certain buildings erupt around me, as opposed to I am building in order to get fame, building in order to get a name, building for notoriety, just kind of parasitically expanding in my building without interrogating why I'm doing it. And so it also means there have been moments where I've had opportunities to create things which I've deemed I don't need to create. And I said no. Ngozi who has worked with me so much, I hope will like stand testament to sometimes it's like a no. Because a wonderful building might erupt from it, but the reason behind it's corrupt. So that's where I'm struggling. I don't actually have an answer, but it is something I interrogate in myself, as all of a sudden you do get to a place and it becomes easier and easier to build things, and you're like, for what? For why? For whom? That's all I got.
Yeah, I just want to say, I really resonate with what Mfoniso said, right? And like, to me, it's always been the difference in building a home and building an empire, right? And I think some people start building homes and end up with empires. And if we nothing from the history of this failed ass nation, right, then like empires cannot be good things, right? That like an empire requires the colonization and genocide of a people, of multiple people, of numerous people across space and time to exist, right? That there is no good way to build an empire. And the thing that we should be working towards is building a home, right? Home is a very different thing. And I think home can sustain you in a different way, right? I just want a space where like I can be, right? And I mean like just be and not have to worry about anything else, right? Where a place where Dominique can just sit and rest. And like the people I love can come to me and I can go to their homes. And I think that this is the thing that the industry does, right? It tricks you into thinking that building an empire is building a house in the same projects. And one of those projects is inevitably going to kill you in a way that the other one won't, right? You might struggle to get to the home. Having a home will not kill you the way having built an empire will, right? And I think that like for me, when I think about entrepreneurship, I think about the sort of necessity of its abolition, right? That like we need, there has to be a way to do away with the way we think about entrepreneurship. Because at the end of the day, to me at least, like Black capitalism doesn't save Black people, right? Like there must be another way to rethink this thing. I think like Black communism may be the answer. Who knows?
What I do think is really important, just riding in on it is also just the interrogation of what it means to say that word entrepreneurship in relation to what it is we're doing is really, really important. Because for me, when the terms get that big, that broad, they become really easy to put things on without knowing anymore what it is.
Oh, this is just so, I mean, just all the notes, all the notes. Okay, so I'm gonna quickly pivot to Facebook Live questions, see what folks are asking on the chat. And then I have like one question before we round out our time here that I just want to plant right now, and then we'll circle back to it. But the question has to do with 50 years from now, what kind of institutions, homes, do you want to see? Okay, I'm just gonna put that out there. Let me go find these Facebook Live questions.
50
okay, 50, another 50. Okay, someone's got a therapist contact for you, Ngozi.
Can we put that in the group chat?
We can put that in the group chat.
Can I get the therapist contact too?
Absolutely.
Saying.
Dr. Cynthia Barnes. Dr. Cynthia Barnes.
Is that with a C or with the however else you spell Cynthia?
C-I-N.
I don't know.
Let me put her in the chat here.
I can be creative. I don't know.
Cynthia Barnes. I got her number here.
SYNTH.
Thank you.
Not since like Cincinnati.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what somebody had for you there.
Good looking out.
So gifts.
Good looking out.
Okay, this last question, I'm not really sure how to frame it, but someone's asking about like, and this might be an interesting question because now we're, this is DQ, we're during quarantine and we don't know when we're going to be. America has been disinvited to a lot of other countries. So this is a tricky question, but someone's asking about the mask. And I think Lee spoke about this earlier, the mask that people present, that Black folk present in certain rooms. This person wants to know about working globally, working internationally. How do you do this dance with representing who you are, So yeah, I'm not really sure what the question is in that, but if anyone wants to speak to maybe working internationally, what's the comment?
Yeah.
So here's what we got. Someone says, do you believe you need to wear a mask even when you are in predominantly white environments outside of the US?
All the same.
Yeah, like a mask is a mask is a mask.
Oh no, it's like anti-Blackness global.
Oh right.
All white people saying, right? Like, and I don't know if that necessitates. I think the mask conversation is an interesting one, like that Du Bois was trying to figure out. And I think that, like, to Lee's point earlier, right, it is a process of like maybe understanding that the mask needs to be undone, right? That like you should just be able to be the person that you are, right? The idea of like a permanent self, right? The Dominique that is up at 3 a.m. playing with the cat is the same Dominique that's directing plays, right? There is no split between them, right? Like that you should just be able to be the same person at all times and show up as fully as you can, even in the face of like rigorous and profound acts of anti-Blackness.
It's this anti-compartmentalization that Mfoniso, you were talking about in relation to bell hooks, which I think is like, yeah, let's like take all the screens off and just be able to be here. Lee, were you hopping in?
Yeah, I was going to say, I actually think we have a responsibility to take off, to decompartmentalize in space. Because it's like, it's that proverb about like, when you shine your light, you empower other people to shine theirs. I feel it, if we are trying to get back to the fullness of ourselves and the softest version of ourselves, then to we owe a debt to ourselves to make sure that we make up for the lost time. Like for that 12-year-old or 15-year-old or 21-year-old kid in me who was afraid to be the full size of myself, I actually owe him back pay in my fullness. And so that like, I make sure that I enter every space the same dude. Like what you see is what you get. And there's a lot of that comes from like our own socialization of being gaslit, right? And how we express and talk about our pain. So we have been socialized to think that if I name my pain in public space or in this idea of mixed company, that there's something wrong with that. Like we all know the stereotypes of like, you know, the angry Black man and the angry Black woman. But then I push back against that. I'm like, yes, but I actually should be angry because anger is a healthy response to oppression. Why aren't you angry too? You know, like, so, or why aren't you, I don't do you any service by wearing the mask, because then I socialize you into thinking that this is the full size of Black people, and it's not. And so it is my responsibility to make sure that I am as unapologetically myself as I can be. I am as equally unapologetically and equally compassionately myself as I can be, and how I move through space. So with, and I find this, like, this is a thing that I take on with like younger Black artists. You know, like I'm always like, you know, challenging, like, you know, like my younger Black brothers and sisters to be like, actually, you do yourself a disservice by shrinking. You don't, like, when, you know, if you pull me aside to talk about how you're being hurt in a white space, you don't have to hush your voice when you talk about white people. You actually can say that with your chest, you know, and you get to name like how you are hurt. And I forget, oh, this is going to kill me. Like, I don't remember if it was Toni Morrison or Zora Hurston, but it was like, if you don't speak up about the ways in which people hurt you, they will eat you and say that you enjoyed it because you never complained. And so, like, I don't want to be eaten. That is just not a desire for me in any space. So if something is causing me harm, I feel like it's my responsibility to not only speak it, but to speak it full-throatedly, and insist on, you know, whatever that repair or reparations or whatever it is, with just as much full throat and passion.
I agree. And I feel like what happens is there's two planes to that, right? Like there's the personal plane when you walk into the space and then they have a perception about you because of the way you look and the way that they expect you to sound and the way that they expect you to represent yourself. And you have to be diametrically opposed to that personally. But then also one of the things that happens to us as creatives, we have these two halves. We have the halves of us that are birthing the children that are inside of our own wombs, and then the halves of us that are being paid or asked to come in and help other people birth their children. And when you're in that writer for hire, director for hire, creative for hire situation, and you're being presented with an idea and a representation of Blackness that is inaccurate, you have to radically challenge it, and you have to speak very, very clearly about why it's wrong, and not just try to, because a lot of times when we talk about having a seat at the table, having access, being invited, being seen, being asked, being hired, being paid, then we start to do that shrinking to say, like, I have to protect my survival, I have to protect my source of income, all these different things, and that disservices the entire narrative. And if you don't come forth and say, I'm not taking this project because it's doing X and this is inaccurate, then you have not done the service of not only the mass, but like you have then poisoned yourself and the rest of us, because now you're allowing this thing to go out and live. And so like we also have to be gatekeepers and not just taking off our masks.
I completely agree with everything everybody has just said. And I also know that in my life, like internationally, I've always worn the mask in terms of like maybe say European internationals. But interestingly, what's coming up for me is I've also worn the mask when I was in Nigeria. surrounded by people who are all my own, and had to put on a mask like I was straight, as opposed to being the queer woman that I am. So it's been also where I am in life. It is glaringly apparent to me when I'm wearing that mask with white folk. And I am now working on where and how I am ever so slightly compartmentalizing and masking with my own, and finding that to be difficult, troubling, because of how much love I have, but also really kind of dedicating my life as much as I can. And it's slow steps, it's early slow steps, but going, I'm not going to compartmentalize anywhere for my health.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
I feel like we lose a part of ourselves. Like, I mean, like it's like, Mfoniso, like we're being asked to amputate parts of ourselves when we do that, you know, and then, you know, expect it to smile, you know, like, and I mean, it's only in the last several years that I've been, you know, like I gave myself the personal challenge to live in both my Blackness and my queerness with the volume on 150, you know, and, you know, and also like, you know, my intellect and my hoodness and that, you know, intersection and like where all of that lives, my Philly and my academic, you know, like all of these things, you know, like my magic and my mess, you know, it is the full size of who I am. And it's my responsibility to like, to know my intersections, you know which lanes are mine, know where I can park. And if there's a meter, make sure I pay my tax. So like that is my responsibility and my responsibility alone. So that I can make sure that I'm not swerving into nobody else's lane, that I don't allow anybody to swerve into mine. That, you know, like, it's, you know, as long as somebody uses a blinker, you know, like, you know, come on in. I mean, like all of these things are important. Somebody's knocking on my door, so I have to go get that for a second. So I will be right back. But you know, I completely agree with you, Mfoniso, and thank you for that. Be right back.
Yes, yes, indeed. All right, we are coming to a little bit before the end of our time. We've got about 4 minutes here. And so this question has now turned into a theater game, which is, in a word or two, can you describe an institution or a home or a radically free space, sustained radically free space that you would like to see established in the next 50 years? I don't know who wants to start us off.
The word that keeps coming to me is provision. Provision, okay. on all sides.
Got you. All right. Maybe I should I just call people's names so that we have to like just put it out there? Okay, Dominique, I'm gonna go with you next.
Yeah, can I actually not answer this question and answer the question you asked about institutions in 50 years?
Awesome. Final questions. Here we go.
Yeah, for me, in 50 years, I hope that there are no institutions, right? I am dreaming of a future wherein the idea of institutions and the soil that has been so deeply corroded by anti-Blackness no longer exists, right? So that when we come out on the other side, when like Black liberation as a project has happened, there won't be words to describe the new things we are going to be able to create. I don't have the language to describe it yet, right? But I know that currently institutions are insufficient, right? That institutions cannot do the work that I need and that people need, right? And so for me, I am dreaming of a world without them so we can get on to the business of making something better.
I'm with it 100%. Ngozi, what do you think 50 years from now?
A place that welcomes people to radically expand. That's the place that I dream of, a place where someone can expand and go through the messy and difficult business of growth and be welcome to do that.
Love it. Lee, the question was, 50 years from now, what do you want to see be established in the world? And we're thinking institutions, homes, we're thinking the complete explosion of the idea of needing institutions. So yeah, that's the question. In 1 to 2 words, can you sum up what you would like to see established in the next 50 years? But before, I'll give you a second to think, Lee and Mfoniso, what do you want to see 50 years from now?
I would love to see pluralistic Blackness within a home, where you have, I have dreams of Africa and her diasporas kikiing it up. And like maybe before there's a theater show, there is actually Erikani Kong soup, and then there's some gumbo, and then there are foods that I should know that I don't know that were derivative of the foods that we did have, and that like we've like we returned and we remembered the way we used to actually do our plays in our old archival, and that like somehow we are sitting all together within a theater and celebrating all the ways Blackness has morphed and become wide and expansive, and we are strong enough as a community to hold all the iterations of what that could look like and be confounding as it could be as well. That's what I like.
I love it. I love it. I love that there's like what are the words to describe this that is coming? We don't even have the words for it yet. And that's amazing, because it'll be a hybrid of amazing, wonderful things. Lee, rounding us off here, 50 years from now.
I would like to see a space that has a larger capacity for radical healing, and for trust. For us to really prioritize trust, and for that to be prioritized across culture. I want to see in 50 years, I want to see Black folks love each other radically, and I want to see other institutions love Black people radically too. I want to see other cultures love Black people radically. I want us to find what that love letter looks like, and how to put that into practice. I want us to find, and respect boundaries and reliability and accountability and vault and integrity and non-judgment and generosity, and for those to be the starting place for our conversations. I want spaces where we don't have to flinch and where we don't have to shrink, and where we can say things full-throated and with our chest and the full size of our hearts cracked open, Like that's what I'm working toward. And that's how I plan to leave every space Blacker than when I found it. So that every space that I'm in is a Black space, even if it's just me sometimes. This means I got to dial up and be extra Black, since it ain't nobody in that space. But yeah, I want to be in spaces where I'm not a minority ever.
Just was writing that last one down. Leave the space Blacker than I found it.
Oh, can I say a quick quote to Lee's beautiful monologue there? One of my favorite writers, Saidiya Hartman, has this quote that she gave in an Instagram Live, where she reminds us that revolutionary love will defeat anti-Black violence. And then she poses the question to Lee's notion of Black love, right? What does it mean to love that which was never intended to be loved? And I think that's very, very powerful about it.
And Saidiya Hartman wrote this book that has been blowing my mind.
Or is it Wayward Lives? Wayward Lives?
This is Wayward Lives. This is Wayward Lives' beautiful experiment. Yes.
She snapped.
Saidiya Hartman is my ace friend and my cousin, and I love her. So hearing y'all quote her makes me so happy. I don't usually name drop, but that's my heartbeat.
You should have started this panel with that, Mfoniso.
That woman is like I'm gonna mute myself now because I've done too much.
Oh my goodness, just blessings and gifts. Oh, come on now. Well, this has been I woke up this morning and I was feeling this, I couldn't quite put the finger to what it was, but this anxiety, this kind of restlessness, this like feeling kind of overwhelmed, and going back to your question, Ngozi, who is this for? Why am I doing this? Why am I, bringing myself to my kitchen every Thursday? And this is a good reminder of why. So thank you for creating this radically free and loving space for me to lay that down. Didn't know how heavy it was.
Chelsea, can I add something before we wrap?
Yeah.
It's something that just occurred to me that I also feel is important to say too, about like one of the things that I'm hungry for in 50 years. There's been a lot of conversation about decentering whiteness, right? And all of those all the conversations around that. But the other part of our healing too lies at the feet at us Black men, so that we can be better for y'all as Black women, and by extension, like Black queer bodies as well. I've seen things like, in the last couple of weeks, and also just in life, where we are often agents of harm. And one of the things that I am hungry for in the next 50 years is for us as Black men to get aggressive and radically repair ourselves so that we can be better for Black women. And that we don't shrink away from the discomfort that comes from true accountability, and the vulnerability that comes from taking off our armor and being able to hold space for ourselves, where we can say, well, yes, we are, there are things that we are victim to in the world, i.e. racism, but here's also where we are agents of harm as well. And like, we're responsible for our half. So that's something that I am personally hungry for. And also like spaces for us as Black men where we can come together and heal. And so that we're not, the ones who leaving scars and not imprints, So that was something that, like, before we left, I wanted to make sure that was said. I really think that there's a radical revolution that has to happen specifically with us as Black men.
Thank you. Couldn't have said it better myself. Really appreciate that. Final thoughts, anyone?
I got love for y'all.
Oh, good.
I got love for deep love. Those are my thoughts. Love, accountability, growth.
Amen.
Being present, staying in the moment. Most of y'all got my number. You know what it is. Call me, Marco Polo me. I miss y'all. Dominique, if you want to get in on that.
Listen, we can form
find me on the Marco Polo. Okay.
I'm saying, y'all been talking about oxtails. Mfoniso talked about gumbo. I'm like, can we have a dinner? Y'all got me hungry over here. Can we cook something and like email some recipes and get a Google Doc going?
Come on.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
I can't wait to gather with you guys.
A Black playwright recipe book. That's what we need.
Yes.
Delicious. Absolutely delicious. So thank you all for joining us here for NBT at Home Founders Month edition. Hit that donate button for the Vision Forward Fund if you've got it. And if you want to share what we're doing here, please, this is free and open to everyone. So please come on in. This is your home as well. So I will see you next week. Thank you to everyone who is here. Artists, please stick around. We can hang out in the green room and chat some more about this Playwrights recipe book. But yeah, so I'll catch you all on the flip side. See you next week. Stay strong.